All right, everybody, here we are. Dancingsean here to talk about The Boys, Amazon superhero show. We are on the penultimate episode of the second season, and this show is really impressive in a lot of ways. I'm excited to talk about it. I feel like the episodes keep getting better. I was a little worried after the first season that the second season couldn't hold up, but I think it's doing outstanding. This episode has some focus on, we'll say, family relationships, to be kind of generic. Plot-wise, it centers around this hearing that's pending concerning Vought in front of Congress, and we'll get into a little bit more of Homelander's son and that relationship and that plot line, I guess we'll say. What we're coming off of from the prior episode was this sort of reveal of the fact that somewhere between Vought and maybe Edgar on his own or Stormfront on her own have been testing with Compound V. We found already that Homelander had been screwing around with Compound V, that it's been this secret that Vought has had, that they've been using it to create superpowered babies rather than people being born with it naturally. And it seems like aside from Vought, and even whatever Vaught's doing, of course they're denying, but there seem to be some other separate testings going on, and that's resulting in some other potentially formed superheroes as adults rather than cultivated from children, which you can see the power of, especially when you have a character like Stormfront, who's been revealed to be not just a passive racist, but maybe an active Nazi, recruiting Homelander to her team, who already had signs of racism himself, and now when he's been given a little more clear of a mission and he's looking for acceptance, that leads into the opening scene of the episode, which itself I could probably do a whole episode just on this scene. It's very interesting, but I don't want to get too caught up in it. But just the idea of how intolerance and fear and ignorance and propaganda can all lead to the radicalization of an individual out there who might otherwise, even if they had some streak of trouble or immorality in them, might not commit murder, but you can see how it could, and how maybe even groups of people could be brought into this. And it's been a theme of the show all along, the idea of the power of media and celebrity, the effect that it can have. There's so much this show touches on, so much more than just this idea of how powerful a superhero is or what kind of special effects they could do. Some very serious commentary on society, modern society specifically, the nature of media and celebrity and the effects that elements of leaders of society can have on the lives of everyone, and the world included at this point. But plot-wise, let me get into what's really happening in this episode. We see that the boys and Congressman Newman are at Mallory's, and they are plotting for this hearing. They've got Lamplighter, who's going to testify. They really think they've got this moment to take down Vought, and they're kind of formulating a plan. It's kind of setting up where this episode is going. Frenchie is tasked with watching Mallory, kind of like he was tasked with watching Lamplighter, and he didn't do a good job, or not Mallory, I'm sorry, Newman, Congressman Newman. And so he seems to do a better job this time, is staying on her. He's got Kimiko with him. They do a little bit of bonding. Huey's tasked with watching Lamplighter. He was wounded in the last episode, so he's not out for action. Or is he? We see that he's determined when trouble comes around. In the meantime, Butcher gets a call from his mom, and she lies to him about his father having died in order to convince him to come meet with her. But of course, the father is still alive. I want to point out here, his mom is Miss Patmore from Downton Abbey. We had a Downton Abbey reference earlier, that a show that Mother's Milk was watching with his wife. I've been watching that show myself. It's a really good show, and I'm kind of glad to see another reference to it here. And another neat little connection. His father is the actor John Noble, and Carl Urban, the actor that plays Butcher, was in a movie with John Noble, Lord of the Rings, and they were characters. I don't think they were specifically father and son. They were in sort of a father and son sort of relationship. I'm a little hazy. I'm not like a super Lord of the Rings nerd. passing no judgment on people that are. I would invite anyone who is to correct me if I'm off a little bit, but I think they were of a relationship, maybe like uncle or some distant cousin, and that John Noble's character had been, we'll say his mind was poisoned by this bad advisor, and he wasn't joining the cause to fight evil, and Carl Urban was trying to get him to, and he got imprisoned. They were odds, similar to how they are here. And eventually they sort of teamed up. Good prevailed. But anyway, interesting little connection to these two characters from prior performances they had together. So we see in their interaction that Sam, Butcher's father, was an abusive father. And throughout the show, I've been just at a minimum frustrated with Butcher's character, and even in attempts maybe to play out his backstory or to see his pain, I still don't feel justified. I still feel like there are people who've suffered similar traumas who don't become as murderous as he does, and we even saw that in his youth he was already violent. He's constantly selfish and reckless and inconsiderate towards others. For the first time, I had the slightest bit of sympathy for him in this scene. When we see how awful his father is toward him, it's revealed that his Butcher's brother, Lenny, killed himself as a result, apparently, of the terrible abusive upbringing that Sam had given the two boys. And I suppose, I don't know how to judge if it's better for a more kind soul like Lenny to kill himself due to abusive parents versus a tough soul like Butcher to become a murderous character. Like, they're both really awful. And I even remember, I think last episode, I sort of concluded that Butcher seems to define success by violent action. And we could see that play out here, that his father's kind of trying to justify himself and how he raised the kids. And basically by saying, look how tough you are. See, you aren't weak like your little brother. And it's just really getting Billy's goat. And it reminds me a little bit, by the way, there's a Johnny Cash song called A Boy Named Sue. And in the song, the father left him when he was young, but had named him Sue. So his whole life he had to put up with being bullied, trying extra hard to prove himself, kind of blame the toughness of his youth on his father who named him Sue. And he runs into his dad in a bar, and they get in a fight almost to the death. And at the end, the father's like, look, you see how tough you are? It's a good thing I named you Sue, to toughen you up. And I don't know, man. On some level, maybe he can thank his dad for making him tough, but who knows what other troubles he had in his life that could have been overcome, that he wouldn't have even needed to be tough. His dad had just been a dad to him. I hate that excuse that I'd treat you tough so that you're better. Why don't you just treat kids lovingly? I think that makes them pretty good too. Why do people have to be so tough, especially in this modern world? Maybe at some time in the past when we're constantly at war and struggling for food, but one way or the other, Butcher snaps, chokes his own dad. His mother got to break it up, and his dad is proud of his son. See, Lenny couldn't have done that. His father is proud of his violent action of his son. Such a weird, twisted way to raise children. We see Butcher just kind of conflicted in himself, just trying to understand himself, his own father. What's he supposed to do? It's such an awkward moment, and for the first time I maybe had some kind of understanding of Butcher. I doubt that this sort of confrontation, this new look at his father, his mom explains to him that's the reason she wanted him to meet so bad, because she thought maybe seeing his father in this weakened state, facing death and cancer, that maybe Butcher wouldn't feel so under his thumb. I doubt Butcher's suddenly going to turn over a new leaf and become kind and understanding. We'll see. I don't even know how much the show is about that. It does seem to be a lot about redemption, why people are the way they are, what, if anything, will make them change. We got at least a couple more seasons, I think, for this to play out. We'll see. It'll be interesting. I don't know if I'll forgive Butcher for his ways, even if he does start to improve. I'd like to think that people can earn forgiveness. But anyway, very interesting interaction. As I said, part of the family theme of the series. There's a father-son relationship there. We see fleshing out the character. In the meantime, Mallory and Mother's Milk go to visit Dr. Vogelbaum, the character that we saw that was responsible for Homelander's upbringing, we'll say. And in this scene, they can't seem to convince him to testify against Vaught. It seems like they have some dirt on him in the past, but he's still not going to play ball. Interesting here, another family mention is that Mallory suggests that Mother's Milk give up this quest for justice and revenge and go back to his family. He doesn't seem to be able to let it go. He seems, at the moment, to be too caught up in the momentum of this mission to abandon everything and go back to his family. Sort of understandable, I guess, especially when you're in the heat of it. Maybe from a distance you might expect him to give it all up, but also maybe understandable the sacrifices that have been made so far. He needs them to pay off. It's interesting, the idea that the kind of torn commitments that people have between their missions, their morals, their families. Another neat little reference here was Vogelbaum referenced Sonnenschein, I guess another researcher that he was trying to pass the buck of blame for this Compound V research to. And Sonnenschein is one of the writers for the show. I don't know if that's just a coincidence or an homage. Maybe Sonnenschein's a character from the comics and they're keeping that name for the show. Maybe a character to pop up in the future, just a coincidence. It's one of the writers' names. I'm not sure, but interesting one way or the other. So we follow up with Butcher going to visit Vogelbaum, and he is a little bit more ruthless. He is not bound by standard morality or courtesy or consideration. I don't know what it is, but he threatens Vogelbaum's family. He's like, look, I'm not even going to try to threaten you with law or repercussion or blackmail. I will kill your family, your daughter, your grandkids, your sisters, whoever. I will just kill your family if you don't play ball. Vogelbaum believes the threat and goes along with it. One thing about this that irks me a little bit, though, is it seems like he would face that same threat from Vought or Homelander or Edgar or whoever. I'm not sure why he gives in to this. Maybe the threat is a little bit more in his face at the moment. Maybe he thinks if he does testify that the people out to get him might lose some of their power to do so. I'm not sure. Maybe on some level he has some trust in Homelander, that Homelander won't snap and kill him. Maybe even will defend him. I'm not sure. It's interesting to think about. I hope it's not just a plot hole. I hope there's some psychological justification behind it. I don't think it's a glaring, terrible plot hole, but it's still something I can't help but think about. In the meantime, another family relationship. We've seen this struggle between Starlight and her mother throughout the course of the show, really. And currently, Starlight, realizing that Compound V was this thing injected into her, not that she was born with, and her mom was in cahoots with Vought to make all this happen, and she just can't forgive her mom, and her mom is trying hard to reconnect, and she realizes that her mom has contacted Vought, and that even though Starlight has removed her tracking ship or whatever, they're still watching her mom, and sure enough, Black Noir busts in, captures them both, and in the meantime, we see that, well, I guess not in the meantime, we'll get to that in a second, but Hugh is going to discover this, but what we see following up is that Homelander and Stormfront are holding a rally. There's a little reference to the murder that was caused in the opening scene, but they quickly brush off that to reinforce the same sort of paranoia against foreigners that caused that in the first place. It's kind of dark to see how these heroic characters with these veiled intentions can rally the populace, especially with the idea that Stormfront is convincing Homelander, look, you can't get everyone on your side. Don't even try. Just get the radicals. Just get extremists and soldiers willing to fight for you. That's more valuable than everyone kind of liking you is a small group of people extremely supporting you. It's a scary thought. We see it starting to happen in this pep rally. They mention Stormfront and Homelander mention Hugh and Starlight. You know, Homelander thinks it's a mistake to even keep Starlight alive. He's been suspicious of her all along. But Stormfront seems confident in the current plan. And in this discussion, Stormfront catches a mother with a baby in a crowd, another little family reference here, and it's oddly touching, the idea that this villainous character still kind of thinks about, her child, seeing this mom and this daughter, and that's enough to spark Homelander, like, oh yeah, I have a kid. Here's a bonding moment with my new villainous cohort, and he brings her to Becca and Ryan. And oh man, again, I feel like every scene with Homelander is a borderline horror movie, but especially when he's interacting with his son and with Becca, and Stormfront shows up too. This has got to be so scary for her. We have this interesting moment where Ryan is showing off one of his hobbies. He's made this little stop motion Lego video of different movies, and the characters are all watching it, and the moms, Becca, Ryan's actual mom, and Stormfront, who has been a mom to at least one child, might be revealed. That would be interesting. Are kind of looking on with a supporting attitude, and Homelander is like scoffing. Wow, he says, and they all turn and look at him, and he kind of realizes like, oh, wow, that's really good. I guess I got to be a supportive dad. The moms are going to get mad at me. Interesting that, however villainous he is, he takes social cues. He understands how he's supposed to behave. He still is concerned about being accepted and loved, and he doesn't want this confrontation in general, especially not in front of his son. It's a very, very interesting moment. Lots of different bits of personality and relationships kind of playing out, even with these superhero characters. It's something you maybe can relate to. It also, by the way, real quick, it reminded me, if anyone's watched Parks and Recs, it reminded me of the Ben Wyatt moment when he was toying around with the stop motion, and it was kind of scoffed at a little bit. So Stormfront is just steamrolling Becca. She's just kind of asserting herself. We kind of see how this is going when Homelander says he wants them to be a family. Who do you think he means when he says we're going to be a family? Becca's not going to be part of it anymore. This has got to be so terrible, so gut-wrenching for her. And we see that Becca tries to make an appeal to Homelander. Look, he needs his mom. She's trying to say, you got to understand that, maybe you don't like this, and it's not the best for me either, but he needs his mom, right? And Homelander seems genuinely concerned for Ryan's upbringing, but he has this different perspective. He's like, look, I was raised around all these lies, and that wasn't good either. Like, I'm not sure I had the best solution. I'm not saying you're totally wrong, but I happen to know what he's going through. I have my insight here too. And for the moment, he seems like maybe he's relenting to Becca, but in the end, him and Stormfront take Ryan away, and it'll be interesting to see where that goes. It'll be interesting to see what is going to come of Ryan. What kind of father or family will they be to him? Is he really, as Butcher pointed out one time, just a $1 billion piece of Vought equipment? Will Vought care about what Stormfront and Homelander do with Ryan? Anyway, again, you could see the family relationships, the mother-father relationships going on here. When I was first watching, I was kind of picking up on this father-son vibe, this father-son motif they had going on. But I realized it's as much about mothers too, with the Becca relationship with Ryan, Stormfront seeing the baby in the crowd. Butcher interacts as much with his mom as he does with his dad. Obviously, there's maybe even family in general as a theme here, but I appreciate that this episode at least seems to have this theme. I'll reference it a couple more times throughout here. Okay, so in the meantime, what we see is that Huey is babysitting, if you will, Lamplighter. And it's interesting that Lamplighter, especially in retrospect, seems to have kind of given up. He's become similarly nihilistic as Butcher and Maeve and several of the other characters. They just feel like their role in the world is just gone. Their reputation is ruined, their independence is lost, they're living in fear, living in guilt, kind of have like, oh well, what are you going to do attitudes, might as well not even try to be moral, as Lamplighter just sits there watching porn. He does point out to Huey, he's like, look, if I do testify, I'm dead anyway. Interesting little bit of foreshadowing there. Huey is able to convince the lamplighter, though, to take one last stand. At least it seems. He seems to be convincing him. When Huey sees on the news, when he can't stand the porn anymore and he flips the channel away, he sees that Starlight has been arrested, apprehended, accused of being a mole for the Seven, part of that photo op that Stormlander and Homefront were having. Did I say Stormlander and Homefront? Homelander and Stormfront. So he convinces Lamplighter to go on this mission in Devot to rescue them. It seems a little bit far-fetched. I guess I can accept that Lamplighter isn't completely ostracized for VOD. He's still working for that lab. He's still working for Stormfront. It's still a little confusing to me what dirt they had on him in the first place when Mallory and the FBI and the boys were using him. Why didn't that dirt come out when he seemed to betray whatever alliance they had? Why is he still alive after whatever that was? What does the public think has come of him? Has no news reporter dug up his location? There's a lot of background stuff that I've just got to accept, okay, fine, including the fact that his security code still works, that he can go walking up and down these halls, and there's a potential concern of guards with AK-47s coming, that there's no patrols, there's no cameras, there's no motion detectors, that they could just walk into the Seven's meeting room, walk right up to the prison where Starlight is in, and okay, fine, I'll accept all the nonsense action and plot just to push through to the connections that we need to make, the next step in the progression of the story that needs to happen. Starlight is able to bust out because the alarms create a new power source that she can draw from to break out of the prison. Black Noir shows up. They punch fight for a minute. He seems to be outdoing her, which makes sense. I've seen some people complaining online that Starlight's not tough enough for a suit, but remember, she is relatively young. We don't know exactly how even the powers are. She got shot in the chest with a bullet, and it didn't blast through her chest, but it knocked her down, knocked the wind out of her, stunned her, whereas we see Homelander and Black Maeve can just be shot up by bullets without even noticing it. Whether that's a difference in their basic powers or a difference in their training, or if the powers strengthen over time, is not clear. A lot of people seem to just assume that Black Noir and all of them are completely indestructible, but I still question quite what it means to be indestructible. Even Stormfront, who seems pretty tough, was wounded by Homelander's laser beams. Black Noir we see in this scene when Maeve comes in to save the day and pulls up his mask. He's got scars, which were almost certainly from his battle with Nassif at the beginning. Nassif, was a suit that was able to create explosions, and Black Noir withstood it, but was wounded. You could see his suit was torn and burned, and his skin was burned and bloody. And so that is revealed when Maeve attacks his Achilles heel, his kryptonite, that he has a tree nut allergy, and gives him an almond joy, another little motif of almond joys continuing through the series. Another little bit to this, it kind of spoils the theory I had going. I was wondering who Black Noir really was, or if he had a relevant secret identity. So far, none of them really seem to. Starlight, it seems to be trying to maintain a secret identity. Homelander said at one point he used to, and I thought that since they were particularly mysterious with Black Noir, that he might have one. It might be some kind of reveal. A lot of people speculated it's Edgar. That didn't make sense to me for a bunch of reasons. They've been in a room at the same time several times. A lot of people have thought, minor spoiler, close your ears for a second in case you're worried about this, from the comics. In the comics, Black Noir was a clone of Homelander, so all kinds of speculations about who Black Noir might be a clone of. The show has said specifically they're not going to do that, or many things that they're doing in the comics. They're just not following the comics. They're following the world and the setup, but they're not really following the specific plot lines. So I have not been assuming any kind of clone stuff is going to happen. I really hope they don't, because it'll cause you as a viewer to question a lot of things. It'll give the writers the ability to take stuff back. I don't like the idea of having clones in there. One way or the other, my little theory was that he had the PR guy. We had seen the PR guy, Seth, pop up a couple times kind of randomly. I thought borderline unnecessarily, other than like, oh, that's neat. But I thought that maybe since they were being so particularly mysterious with Noor, and since they had this character pop up a couple times even outside of his role as the PR guy, that maybe it was him and we hadn't seen him in the same place at the same time. But clearly we've seen that Seth character without the scars on his face since that moment happened. So I guess that eliminates that theory. Unless he's a clone of the Seth guy anyway. So we go to another happening here, another couple characters that we've been following, or a few characters I guess, is the Deep attempting to make amends for the mistakes that he's made, that again I feel like seem pretty genuine for him personally, even if they're kind of mixed up in some sort of cult, some sort of ulterior motivations he may even have to get back on the Seven. But aside from that, he does still seem to be generally trying to make amends for his abusive relationships with women and probably some other abusive relationships too. But he's been taken into this church cult, and he's drawing A-Train into it, as A-Train is on the outs from the Seven himself, and this Alistair character who's been kind of mysterious, but seems to be a person of power. This church keeps coming up, and I feel like in the past, when we get a character referenced a couple times, and then he gets a speaking line, suddenly they become central to the plot line. For example, this Newman character, started off on a news report on TV. Now she's becoming a little bit more central, more lines, more interaction with the rest of the characters. Seems to be happening with this Alistair character. And in fact, I can't help be suspicious of what level of power or cahoots that he might be in with Vought and or Edgar. I'll talk about it a little bit more in a moment. But and by the way, you might be able to argue that this is another sort of a family moment that we have here with the Church of the Collective, that they are sort of like a family. It might be hard to define family, but I feel like they would like to be thought of as a family. But they're quick to kick someone out. We see A-Train trying to make amends with the Deep. The Deep, we heard kind of complain about some things that A-Train had done to him in the past. The Deep trying to be honest, maybe even too honest if there's such a thing. Maybe not tactful, but trying to level with A-Train. And A-Train seems to have taken it to heart, and he gives the Deep a gift and seems to want to apologize for how he had behaved toward him in the past. Alistair tells him, hey, I'm going to get you guys back into the Seven. It borderline confirms that he's got them back into the Seven. Interesting what makes him think that is going to happen, who it is he's interacting with to make that happen. But in the midst of this, he pretty much commands them to not have anything to do with the character Eagle. Eagle is someone that seemed to have really bonded with the Deep, seems to have really helped the Deep out, seems to have been a supporter of the church. And Alistair says, nope, he's out. And the Deep's like, okay, fine, he's out. And it's weird how much power Alistair seems to wield over the Deep, and you wonder how suspicious A-Train will be of that, if A-Train will get drawn into it as well, if he's as vulnerable as the Deep is, if he cares as much about getting into the Seven to accept, I don't know, instructions that he doesn't understand or agree with. Anyway, clearly there's something more coming from that, and some of that even starts to tie into our final scene, the hearing. I realize I forgot a key thing I want to point out. So before I get to the hearing, I just want to point out that in that moment of the showdown and a rescue with Huey and Black Noir and Starlight and all that, Lamplighter kills himself, and that's kind of was a horrific scene, kind of a disappointing scene. It seemed like he was looking for some sort of redemption, maybe kind of, at least, and it seemed like he might be key to this hearing that's coming up and their ability to take down Vought, and I feel like there were still some mysteries around him that I was curious about. But right before he kills himself, he says all he wanted to do was impress his dad. And again, another father-son relationship, another example of how parents push their kids too hard. the effects it can have, at least at the extremes. We saw a similar pushing of Starlight's mom toward her. It's not just a father-son thing. And something else to think about is that, even though these might seem kind of extreme, the effects of these poorly managed parental relationships, or the effects that leaders can have when they make a statement to the press, even if something like that only affects 0.0001% of the population, when the population is millions and billions, you're affecting thousands and thousands of people. And guess what? There are thousands and thousands of murderers out there. There are thousands and thousands of people being abused. There are thousands and thousands of people with psychological disorders. And I do feel like the show, especially, not just from watching it, but I happen to have some insight from some interviews I've seen with Eric Kripke. He does seem to be making commentary. He does seem to be using his platform, The Boys, to talk about how society works and the effects of how we treat people and our children. And it is kind of ironic that the show seems to be appealing to machoism, and it seems to be glorifying violence. But at the same time, it seems to me making commentary on violence and questioning how we behave in society and how we treat violence in our children and so on. I don't know, I suppose it's worth it for the sake of viewership to get the things that appeal to a mass audience in order to have them reconsider elements of morality in society. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm being too judgmental myself, but one way or the other, we get to this ultra-violent scene in this closing moment, this hearing. I watched this scene over and over again for you guys. I hope you appreciate me putting up with this mind-blowing moment, okay? We've got everyone gathered either at this hearing or watching this hearing, everyone being our central characters and maybe the community, the population in this fictional world. All eyes are on it. And just as Vogelbaum comes in to make his damning testimony to the committee, suddenly the chairman's head pops. It just explodes, blood everywhere, and everyone around is just stunned. The viewers, ourselves, the audience, the people watching the show. And you might remember that we had the character Susan, the CIA agent, who was a contact for the boys, a resource for the boys. Her head also exploded. We never really got a good explanation for how or why it happened. We get a sort of a hint at the facility where they were testing Compound V. We saw that someone that had been experimented on escaped, and she seemed to have at least a similar power. She seemed to more cause things to implode than explode, but maybe if you explode someone's head, it still ends up exploding. The pressure, I don't know how the physics of exploding heads work, but it also doesn't make sense for it to be her for another reason. Well, for several reasons, because a lot of people have speculated that she's the one doing it, but it doesn't make sense. As far as we could tell, that when Susan's head exploded, that character Cindy seemed to be locked up. Maybe she wasn't and got locked up after the fact, but it's still weird. Why would she explode? What was her motivation to do that to Susan, and also to not do it to any of the boys at that time? And what is her motivation here? She specifically said she doesn't like liars, and here is an attempt for people to reveal the truth, and she kills the person that's the head of the attempt and kills the person that's about to reveal the truth. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that Vought would have control over her. It just doesn't add up to me. Now, who does have this power? We don't know, but it's interesting to think about a couple things. Who was present? Who was there for this, right? And we'll assume almost anyone is there was in some sort of danger, but Edgar was not there. Edgar, the head of Vought, seems like this is an important moment. There were other representatives for Vought there. Maybe he was too busy for the congressional hearing where the future of his company is at stake. What else is he busy with? So he wasn't there. Now, some people speculate maybe he has the power. Can he do it from a distance? Maybe he was in the next room. That all seems really weird. I think it would be a little unusual for Edgar to have a superpower, but not completely crazy. Homelander does seem to have a certain level of respect for him. Worth noting that Homelander didn't seem to be scared. Neither did Stormfront in this moment. Now, maybe that comes from their invincibility. Even if their heads theoretically could be popped, they might not think that they could be. It's unclear. We saw translucent even though he seemed to be indestructible to pretty much everything, could still get blown up from the inside. Homelander has got to be at least aware that Translucent was destroyed. He still might believe or know that he's tougher than that. So does Stormfront. Maybe it's beyond that. Maybe even aside from their specific powers, however much they or we understand them, or how much the writers have spelled it out, which they haven't really. So a lot of people just assume they're indestructible, but they're not exactly knowing what that means. They still might, even if they don't actually have the confidence, they might recognize they need to present an air of confidence. It's just not in their character, their real character, or the character that they need to present to the world to panic, to show fear, to run away or anything. They kind of need to just stand there and keep their cool. But they do look startled, if not scared. Maybe Stormfront is a little bit more calm than Homelander. I watched this scene over and over, trying to pick up if anyone in the room seemed to be calm or directing their eyes towards explosions. I just couldn't. Everyone seemed to be in a startled, stunned, if not panicked mode, to include the superheroes. A-Train, who maybe is a little bit newer, maybe he's fast but not indestructible, but he panics and his head explodes. I don't know if anyone's ever seen Homestar Runner or knows the character Strong Bad. Probably a very small group of people know what I'm talking about when I say your head explode. But anyway, those who do are hopefully laughing right now. But it's interesting to think that they hit the chairman and Vogelbaum, and I would say, not only to end this moment of attempting to discover what's going on, which would clearly be in Vought and Edgar's best interest, but also shockwaves. And so maybe it's just random who's being hit in air, which it doesn't seem completely random, but that's a message being sent to Soups. You're not safe either. No one's safe from this, it seems, not even a Soup. There are 11 other people that I could count whose heads got popped. None of them seemed significant. None of them seemed to be named characters or speaking characters. I paused, rewind, play, pause, back and forth over and over again. There didn't seem to be any particular rhyme or reason to the other people getting hit. Maybe a little rhyme or reason to who wasn't getting hit. It's worth noting that Mallory wasn't hit. Ashley wasn't hit. Of course, Stormfront and Homelander weren't hit, but Congressman Newman wasn't hit. That's interesting. And so it's unclear, if maybe they just wanted to get the head of the chair, the head of the committee, and Vogelbaum, and then a Soup, just to make that point, and then a bunch of others. But it's interesting that Shockwave being hit frees up that space on the 7 for A-Train, which adds a little question in my mind to whether or not Alistair either did that or at least knew it was going to happen. It's very suspicious. It makes me think a lot about what kind of relationship the Church and Alistair might have with Vought and Edgar. It seems to me like they would have a lot to gain from working with each other, even if it's in a clandestine manner, maybe not a public manner, but they borderline publicly seem to be kind of working together if the Church is actively trying to get members of the 7, in their church. And maybe that's not with Edgar's wishes. Maybe that's just beneficial to them. Interesting to see. We haven't seen either of them discuss each other specifically. There's lots of mysteries to unfold there. And it's going to lead me into a little bit of speculation about what's coming up in the last episode. Going into the show, I avoided watching trailers. I feel like they really spoil a lot. I kind of wanted to assess things on my own. There's certainly a lot of research to be done on external information. You can learn a lot by reading about the comics and watching interviews with the writers and the directors and behind the scenes stuff and analyzing every little image that comes out. But I want to mostly just assess the show for the show, just like the average viewer would. But as we get deeper in, I'm less worried about spoiling for things for myself, and maybe it's a little bit more worth trying to figure out what's going to happen in this last episode. So I'll talk about a couple things. One thing I took note of when I did go ahead and finally watch the trailers, wondering what images were in the trailers that hadn't been revealed yet that were coming up in the next episode and what that might reveal. And one of them was more of like a backwards looking thing, is that they made a big point in the trailer of Butcher saying, "Daddy's back," which with all my father-son relationship, family stuff that I was thinking about in this episode, that really stood out to me, that maybe it is an active theme that the show is trying to keep in there. But in the trailer for this episode, the recap, if you will, before we started this particular episode, we saw the head pop, Susan's head pop. We saw Congressman Newman making a speech, and then we saw a reference back to Vogelbaum. And so, sure enough, all those three things happened in this episode. Well, there's one other thing they showed us in the trailer that didn't quite play out in this episode, so it makes me think it's something they want us to keep our eyes on, which was this moment when Starlight and Stormfront are kind of butting heads, and Stormfront is Starlight. They're kind of revealing to each other the dirt that they have on each other. Even though neither of them had quite revealed it yet, of course, at this point, it seems like Stormfront revealed the dirt on Starlight, but Stormfront told Starlight that she has a plan for her, that you're going to work well for me. And we saw that come again here, and so you really got to think what it is that Stormfront wanted to do with Starlight, maybe just having her as a prisoner, maybe using her family. I don't know. You can imagine a lot of potential things. She didn't want Homelander to just kill her, though, so she didn't want her to be a martyr. I wonder if somehow she can, absorb her power. It's interesting to think about the two of their powers, that Starlight seems to absorb energy, electrical energy, and, regurgitate it, if you will, into her own blasts of power, where Stormfront seems to emit energy, and electrical specifically, it even seems. So I wonder if they will feed off each other somehow, if one will cancel the other out. And in fact, there were a couple clips of the two of them. It seems to be having some sort of showdown. I didn't quite show them facing off, about to punch fight each other, but there's a scene of a field and a structure, and they're emitting electricity. You got to guess there's going to be some sort of climatic battle showdown coming up in the next episode. We also see, the scene that I've seen a lot of people speculating online. There's a scene of Homelander looking downward. There's these trees above him that are reminiscent, at least, of the texture of Becca's home, okay? And Homelander's face, we'll say, it looks concerned. I can't quite think of the way to phrase it, but it will say concerned, disquieted look on his face, and it's just splattered with blood. And we've seen plenty of characters' faces splattered with blood, but gotta wonder, lots of people are wondering, who is this here that has their blood splattered all over Homelander's face? What is he looking at? Is he worried? Is he concerned? Is he sad? Is it Ryan? Is it Becca? Who could it be? Who could it be? There aren't that many people he seems to really care about, and the ones that he seems to really care about seem pretty tough. It doesn't seem like they're the type to have their blood splattered all over. So it's really interesting to think about what that team might be, what they might be setting up for the third season. We know there's going to be a third season. There's probably some more research that I could do into just the casting of the third season that will reveal stuff, but I haven't done that yet. Don't want to do that till this season is done. But it is worth noting, just the knowledge of a third season coming sort of reveals some things on its own. You sort of know it's not going to suddenly have a tidy, happy ending at the end of the next episode. We kind of know that there's going to be something left for the future season. And I sort of suspect that there's got to be a check on Stormfront and or Homelander. The two of them uniting, especially with some sort of master plan of injecting Compound V into a super racist race, with Congress unable to stop them, with the military unable to stop them. It's just too much. It's hard to see how the good guys can come back. We know another piece of this, I didn't mention it, but Maeve is another character in the mix here who seems to be aligning herself against Vought and or Homelander and or the Seven. I expect maybe a big showdown, different sides of soups, to either happen next episode or to be set up to happen next season. Unsure how it will play out. I wonder if the third season will become more global. Again, I hope it's not just this power creep of superhero powers and action CGI scenes. So far, it doesn't seem like that's what they're doing, so I'm going to stay hopeful for the third season. One way or the other, not long before the next episode comes. Thank you for watching me go on and on and on about this. I hope people watching appreciate this in-depth analysis. I invite anyone to give me any kind of feedback, anything I missed or misspoke on or you're curious about. And like my channel, please. Subscribe to my channel. Like me on, or follow me rather, on Twitter. I'm Dancingsean there, just like I am on YouTube. I thank everyone for your support, and hopefully I'll see you again for the next episode. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.